Maybe we can go for our little gadgets of things to recommend during this hour.
Yeah, I've just done a converted my garage as well, so I'm going to completely start from blank sheet of paper, new desk, new screen.
You've got like 2 doors right next to you as well. It's like you living in like a, is it like 2 doors?
This isn't the office. This is the spare bedroom. The office hasn't quite been finished yet. It's just.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Very good. I can see Shane or Sean. If you're American, then I can see he's got a running machine behind him as well. Is that a clothes horse or is that an actual running machine?
The wife regularly puts clothes on it just to embarrass me.
Yeah, as I said, we just bought a Peloton clothes horse. It's really good.
Yeah, we've got Peloton. I can't get used to it though. Those shoes are not.
Yeah, before we bought this house, and I actually got a dedicated room to work in, or the last house we were living in, I had to work out of the bedroom. And so working from home, I was spending 16 hours a day in the bedroom, which was, north facing, so the sun never shone into it.
Right.
A little bit.
And what, we just sat on the bed, or did you have a desk in there?
So we are live. People can hear us and see us, which we weren't aware of. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, Ewan. Welcome to our tech discussion panel for beers and peers. Hope everyone's got a beer and is enjoying some of the sunshine and lovely weather that we're getting. And we're going to be chatting this afternoon about unlocking the true potential of Microsoft's WVD with Citrix and IGEL. So I'm trying to advance my slide. So, who's going to talk to you this afternoon? My name is Shane O'Neill. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect working at Enterprise Solutions. I'm a current Citrix technology professional as well. I've worked as both a Citrix partner and a customer, and I've worked on large-scale deployments, ranging to the tens of thousands of users. Also joining me is Tom Hickling from Microsoft, Danny Clark from Citrix, and Craig Hinchcliffe from IGEL. Guys, introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I suppose I'll go as I'm next on the slide. Yeah, so my name's Tom Hickling, work at Microsoft. I've actually had a role change last week to becoming a program manager inside of WVD engineering. So I can now drop the whole Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt, which was a bit of a mouthful, a bit of a silly name, I think. But anyway, that Global Black Belt was there to denote a specialization inside of our whole Azure set of capabilities. And obviously that specialization with WVD. So now having moved over to engineering, it's a slightly different role. It's similar in the specs of being customer focused, but rather than, I suppose, trying to sell the virtues of WVD, it's more about getting customer feedback and passing that through to engineering to develop the product moving forward.
Cheers. Danny Clark, lead systems engineer at Citrix. I work in the financial services and insurance vertical. I've been at Citrix for just under 3 years, but I've been around Citrix and end user computing for 20 plus years as a customer, worked at a partner, founded and ran a consultancy for 15 years and then came on board here. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Danny. Craig Hinchcliffe, now IGEL. I'm in my month 4. If anybody wants, I'm not drinking beer. This is a Moscow Mule. This is my favorite drink that I learned from Citrix. I was at Citrix for 13 years as a product manager and pre-sales. Tom was actually one of my customers back in the day. One of my first customers, I think like 2008, 2009. Before I worked for distribution. I think they're now called Arrow, but it was Computer Links and Unipalm. And before that, consultancy on the Citrix. I've been around the Citrix space for 20 plus years, similar to all of you, I guess. So yeah, just here to help along with the conversation.
Okay, thanks, guys. And as we're chatting away, folks, please feel free to throw any questions you have into the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. So I think just kicking off our conversation, when we're talking about Microsoft WVD, I think that it's thrown around a lot, and I'm not sure if everyone truly understands what it is out there today, you know, that there are different elements that make up WVD. We've got our control plane, we've got our hypervisor, you know, what are the entitlements for it. So I don't know, Tom, you know, when you're first explaining WVD to a customer, where do you start with them?
Well, so typically the conversation tends to fall into two categories. The first, I suppose, simplistically, is what it is technically, which is exactly what you're showing there. Maybe if you just, I think, press the next button twice, or yeah, that's good. Because this is the sort of high-level architecture of what WVD is. So effectively, when we're talking about it technically, it is a management service that Microsoft owns and operates on behalf of our customers. It's a PaaS service, meaning that customers don't need to do anything. So no procurement, no taking delivery of servers, no racking and stacking deployment, no patching. They just consume it as an evergreen service, which itself obviously fully runs inside of Azure. So that takes away a whole host of management capabilities and requirements that the customers have to do. So I suppose most of the people on here have probably done Citrix, RDS, VMware, whatever it might be, so know that there's lots of roles that need to be deployed in all of those, including RDS native. We take care of all of that and deliver that from Azure. In addition to that, WVD has a particular new feature called Windows 10 multi-session, which is really the hero capability, we like to think, coming from WVD. Now, when I say it's a feature of WVD, that sounds a bit strange because it sounds like that's just a new SKU of Windows, which it absolutely isn't. So you can't go and download Windows 10 multi-session. There's no licenses that you can go and run this. It's a feature of WVD, meaning that WVD is the only place where you can run this Windows 10 multi-session, with two exceptions, one of them being Citrix and then one of them being another company beginning with W. And Windows 10 multi-session, like I said, is our sort of hero solution. It's the best of both worlds, coming from a Windows Server, RDS, Citrix, XenApp, or CVAD, whatever it's called these days, as well as Windows Client delivering the VDI use case. So it's bringing the scalability that's only been possible with Windows Server, but with the true rich Windows Client or Windows 10 user experience that most users out there have come to expect.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that all of the VMs that you run for WVD inside of your Azure subscription are all charged at what's referred to as either the Linux rate or the base compute rate. So all VMs inside of WVD, all VMs inside of Azure, I should say, have two prices. One's the Windows cost and one's the Linux. The Linux cost is the cost of the VM minus the Windows license for the duration that you've got it powered on, effectively. So it's much cheaper. And that is because WVD is actually entitled to customers through a M365 license, or in fact a Windows license. So you can't go and actually license WVD on its own. It's actually licensed through a license entitlement that most customers already have. And that license already includes Windows. So we're not going to charge you twice, which means you'll be charged at the lower rate inside of Azure for these VMs. And what that means is that WVD, or Citrix Cloud for that matter, is the cheapest place that you can run Windows VMs. And lots of customers say, well, where has this come from? Is this a new thing? And the answer to that is yes and no. So no, this is a rich heritage. This has come from the days of terminal services, going back, I don't know, 27 years to the days of Windows NT, through to RDS, through to a product called Azure Remote App, which was our first foray into delivering this from the cloud. However, when we talk about it being new, it's not just an evolution of that, or the next version of that. It's a major step change. And the reason we can say that is that WVD is actually, what we've done from the RDS code is modernize it and moved it over to a thing called Azure App Service. So inside of there, behind the scenes, they're not thousands of Windows servers running all of this. We've moved the code and detached it from the dependency on Windows Server and moved it into Azure App Service. Now, Azure App Service is a global web hosting platform, and that's significantly underselling. We've got lots of customers whose entire business is an individual Azure App Service. So that's why we can say this is a major revolution. The benefits that that brings to the customers is we can drop in updates every single day if we wanted to. Now, we don't do it every single day, but we have that capability. So customers will always be getting the most recent set of capabilities that Microsoft makes available to WVD because we are now based upon another Azure app service. And then I suppose the conversation kind of changes around what's the value. So when we start having that conversation, it takes me back to one of the last events that we had before coronavirus kicked in, where the CEO said, and this is probably going back a year and a half, said that end user computing has been about connecting users to Windows. And I sat back and thought, it's not strictly true for two reasons. The first, which is maybe slightly off topic, but I've always thought that end user computing is about connecting users to applications. Now, it might be run on Windows, but that's kind of slightly irrelevant because the users, all they want is applications. But the second point I thought was that that's fundamentally missing the point about what's happened recently in computing all up, let alone end user computing, and that is the adoption of the public cloud. Obviously, in our case, that's Azure. And Azure has then introduced massive amounts of benefits to us as a service that runs on it, and thus that can be made available to our customers. So some of those things are, Azure is a global hyperscale cloud. So we've currently got 64 Azure regions that are online. We've made announcements this week about 10 new countries that will get their own Azure region. We announced Malaysia earlier this week. And it makes you just think that, so if you're a customer and you suddenly acquired a company in Malaysia, let's just say, and you had to then go and deliver them your corporate apps, how do you go about delivering them those corporate apps? If you're a company based in, I don't know, Cork or Dublin, wherever it might be, you would IT would typically have to go and deliver, their standard virtual desktop and get those users to access it from Malaysia over to Ireland. So it's not going to be a fantastic user experience. What if you could just go and deploy these now in an Azure region very, very close to those users? Now, it's not quite the case with Malaysia because it's not online yet, but there's 64 regions closer to these massive population centers where you can go and deliver those apps. And I suppose the other thing is the standard benefits that Azure brings. So things like availability, SLA-backed availability, resiliency, elasticity, flexibility, the choice of hundreds of virtual machines that you can make available to your users, and the fact that it's all consumption-based pricing. So no longer do customers have to pay upfront for a service and then pay for it whether users are using it or not. So now you only pay when you start to use it, and if you can power everything off, then we stop charging it. So the cloud has fundamentally changed end user computing, both now, so customers can go and deploy this and get some of those benefits. The other things are what Azure provides or will provide in the future. So now end user computing professionals have the capability of going into Azure and deploying a long list of services. Some of those may have a relevance in end user computing. So one of the things that sticks in my mind is we have an IoT service, completely unrelated to WVD, but customers could use that. So imagine cars being IoT enabled, car parks, car spaces being IoT enabled, or security barriers at the front of your office. These could all be reporting back into Azure where, IT admins could be making decisions based on that. And those decisions might be power on the user's virtual machine when they've walked through the security gate, that kind of capability. Plus the vast marketplace that we've got. So, Citrix have got products in our marketplace, and it makes it much easier for users to go into that marketplace and just go and deploy something in a sort of consumer-based transaction and add that into their deployment. All of those things were unprecedented up until, I suppose, the cloud came along.
Yeah,
So,
and I think especially in the last year with the whole COVID impact, one of the things we really saw with Azure and WVD was the ability to scale out and scale up you know, quickly customers to react to situations, you know, add more resources, scale up and down your VM sizes, add more resources to them. So it gives customers that flexibility to be able to react to situations. In fact, Azure was under pressure. People were scaling up so quickly for COVID.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it was just an unprecedented period back. What was it, last March? Yeah, but yeah, fortunately, lots of customers have worked their way through all of that.
Yeah, and you know, when WVD, again, people, you know, think about it as just being the hypervisor and the VMs and stuff, but it's actually an access layer as well. So you've got native WVD, where you can use various clients to connect to your desktop or applications over an RDP protocol. You know, how much, you know, usage of that is there out there, I guess?
Well, we've got lots and lots of customers who are doing WVD native, i.e. that means not having Citrix or something else included in that. So the relationship with Citrix has probably is now stronger than it's ever been, and the relationship exists at various levels inside of Microsoft. So the execs as well as the developers over in Redmond have a very close relationship with their Citrix counterparts around what we're doing, what they're doing, and how, you know, our roadmaps should converge. So what that means is customers now have a choice. Now our set of capability is, I suppose, much the same as it's always been in the past. We are more down lower level in the stack, I suppose, and providing the core infrastructure. And that's fine for some users and for some customers, some of which could be enterprises. However, in conversations with customers, we do broach the subject of, do you need this? Do you need that? And that often, the answer is often, oh yes, we need this thing. And that is often something that's only delivered by Citrix. So whilst, yes, we do have, and I actually don't know the numbers, up-to-date numbers, but there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of WVD native customers. And we probably have a very similar number who are using Citrix Cloud and Horizon Cloud, if I'm honest, where, you know, the customer is taking advantage of the additional value add that both of those provide on top of WVD native, whilst the customer still gets the benefits, like I just mentioned, of WVD native and Azure, for that matter.
Yeah, Tom, I guess
Sorry.
I was going to say, I guess it's comparable to the older days of, and you mentioned it's already, terminal services on its own. Like, can I just use terminal services and then, as you quite rightly said, you know, putting Citrix or other vendor on top to put the additional value? Is it down to scale or performance? Is it down to the protocol? Whatever those additional necessities are for the customer. If they don't need them, then just use the raw terminal services or the WVD now. Or if you need the additional bells and whistles, then, you know, bring in the likes of Citrix.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the conversation is effectively the same. It's just the widgets that are now slightly different. So rather than it being terminal services versus XenApp, let's just say, it's, you know, WVD with all of its bells and whistles, and plus Citrix have got these other sort of slightly bigger bells and whistles for these use cases, which might be exactly what you need. Hence, our recommendation is to say, well, Citrix Cloud is probably the way to go, Mr. Customer. We want you to be as successful as possible, and we're all about sort of choice and flexibility here.
And I think that's one of the key words there is choice, because, you know, when you start to, I think, bring Citrix Cloud into the mix here, you're really expanding the choice that's available to the customer. Especially with the hybrid cloud capabilities, you know, that they have the choice then of what they want to manage and where they want to manage. You can have both your WVD in Azure, or you can still have your legacy on-prem environments that you could be pulling in. You know, when you're like Danny, when you're talking to customers about Citrix Cloud as well, you know, how much do you find that hybrid benefit is key to them?
But I think that is kind of, it's not USP, but that's number one priority for a lot of our customers. So just to mirror what Tom was saying, you know, from a Citrix perspective, we don't see this as a competitive position. We see this as a complementary position. So we think WVD is great. We think all of our customers should be considering it, looking at it, evaluating it, and working out whether its core capabilities are enough for them. And clearly, we believe we add to that. So the diagram here just kind of shows there are a number of areas. We have a range of additional services that sit in the control plane. We've got a range of additional capabilities around image and application management. We've got hybrid cloud, which I'll come back to in a second, including things like remote PC, and then all the other things you see here with the HDX, the protocol, the multi-cloud. Hybrid cloud is definitely number one. So WVD, as Tom says, is an Azure-only service. So if the customer wants a desktop in the cloud and they're happy that it runs in Azure only, and having evaluated the product works for them, then great, stop there by all means. What we think is that certainly, in my space, in the financial services insurance space, most of my customers will have a requirement to run workloads outside of WVD. So whether that's on-prem or in multi-cloud. And that's where our sort of single pane of glass orchestration layer really helps them. We've got technology coming out very soon, which will ease even the migration between those cloud locations, between on-prem and WVD, and potentially out into other locations as well. So on-prem workloads, whether that's a strategic decision, so the customer decides we're going to keep these things on-prem, or whether it's a migration position, so whether it is helping the customers make the move. So if you decided today you want to go into WVD, are you going to move all of your users on Monday, or are you going to have a kind of multi-month, multi-year migration strategy? And obviously the hybrid cloud model really suits that as well. And the key thing, Tom touched on this earlier, it's all about the apps. So where do your apps live? Where's the back-end data? We both Microsoft and Citrix got great heritage with their protocols of solving that latency issue between where the workload sits and where the desktop sits and where the user sits. That's fine. The challenge is where's the latency between the application and the desktop. So the design decisions come into play. Where are your back-end infrastructures? Where's your data? Where's your web services? Are they on-prem or in Azure or somewhere else? And host your desktops as close as possible to that. So that's where that kind of flexibility and hybrid multi-cloud capability really comes to the fore.
Yeah, and I know from talking to a lot of customers now, they may not be ready to start going to the cloud, but everybody wants to start their cloud journey there. And one of the first things that we could talk about with when they're on Citrix Cloud WVD is a lot of people want to talk about how they could use it, just for DR for now. That they're still running their workloads on-prem, but in a situation where that goes down, they can then burst into Azure with WVD to get that capability. So that's always something I find people are very interested in, even if they're not full hilt production into Azure. Yeah,
that burst capability or DR capability is absolutely key. I think we've seen that massively, obviously, over the last year. From our side also, the remote PC thing, which has been part of our portfolio for sort of 15, 20 years now, the ability to treat a physical desktop as a kind of end user computing host. We've had customers who've gone from hundreds to tens of thousands of users connecting by that over the COVID response. But the ability to burst out and, as Tom said, pay for what you need, and that is absolutely key to our customers. Whether it's a strategic direction or whether it's insurance customers that are bursting out because they've got more insurance claims based on a flood or a weather event or a COVID, just having additional need but only paying for it when you want to is one of the key, obviously, attractors of having a pay-as-you-go model in the cloud. And then we've got technologies that optimize that. So this diagram just touches on how we complement and extend WVD from a technical perspective, but we also again take what Microsoft has done and layer on improvements around the end user experience. So things like our workspace app for a truly kind of engaging user experience, and the protocol enhancements and things that we do around browser content redirection and secure browsing. So there's user experience stuff. There's the administration. So anybody that's looked at WVD, it's great, but I'm no PowerShell guy. There's lots of work to be done where I think our cloud control plane makes that a lot simpler, but also around things like
I was going to agree, definitely it simplifies a lot of the administration around us using the Citrix cloud control plane.
But there's other areas. So I mean, there's security enhancement again. Microsoft's security stack is fantastic, but again, there's a few things that we layer on top in terms of key logging protection, screen scraping protection, our security analytics, things like geo-fencing, looking at security, user behavior analytics, that kind of thing. But the other thing is, from a kind of commercial perspective or financial perspective, there's lots that we do to optimize the consumption of WVD. So with combinations of things like our WEM technology, our MCSIO, our browser content redirection, our HDX, there's a bunch of things that we do that can reduce the consumption cost of running your workloads in WVD by, I mean, we've seen anything between sort of 25 and 70% reductions in spend for a given workload just by optimizing that. Now, that will vary obviously depending on the apps and the the usage of the workloads, but there's a bunch of stuff that we do within our portfolio that increases it in all four of those kind of value areas. So if anyone wants to investigate those on an individual basis, then of course they can give us a call.
Yeah, and one of those features I think really you should be getting a lot of love is the auto scale capability, where you can set your defined schedules either based on time schedule or on user load to spin up and spin down the resources as you need, because every minute that you're running a resource in public cloud is clocking up cost for you. And the auto scale now, especially with the vertical scaling capabilities, fill up one server, bring up the next one, fill up one server, fill that up. Now I know WVD has native capabilities around that as well, and it is improving, but I think auto really
at the end of the day, auto scale, it is, you're right, it's powering on machines when you need them and turning them off when you don't. It is no more sophisticated than that. That's what it's all about. Our technology in that area is fairly sophisticated, it's fairly intelligent. As you say, you can do it with the native WVD tools, you can do it with PowerShell scripts. There's third parties out there, community scripting that can do something similar. So what we've got isn't it's not magical. It's just intelligent power management of those virtual machines. But it is certainly part of that savings model compared to just being able to do it on demand versus just schedule can make a big difference to your bill at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it brings just that intelligence and ease of administration as well. Whereas the average administrator doesn't have to go messing around with PowerShell scripts or anything like that. They can just basically use a nice GUI interface to set it, and that just brings that simplicity to their experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the interesting thing, Shane, is back when I was at Citrix, I worked in product management. And very much like Tom at Microsoft, like Workspace is nowhere near at the scale that Teams is, right? I think Teams is 115 million daily active users now, Tom, or something crazy like that. Ridiculous. But I remember when we first started Workspace, we got excited when we saw 5,000 daily active users log in. During COVID, we hit 900,000 daily active users because people didn't have a choice. It's not because the technology is crap or that they didn't want to go to cloud. Things were accelerated for them because there were so many sort of, like, even Citrix themselves. We were like, how are we going to enable all of our developers to work from anywhere? And you would think, well, surely Citrix use their own technologies, right? Well, you'd be surprised that back then it didn't. But what they did is they deployed, obviously via a micro app, because that's the new way of doing everything. They used a micro app to talk to SCCM to deploy the the Citrix VDA, so the remote PC agent, to all of their developer workloads. And then those users then had a notification telling them that their virtual workload was now available inside Workspace, and then they connected directly from home to their typical PC that they were using in their development, developing their code on. We also saw this, I think Jason Samuel very well from the CTP world. He told me, and I'm sure he told you this story about a certain well-known car manufacturer in the US. I think there was a NetScaler glitch at the same time as COVID. You remember when everybody was talking to turn off their NetScalers? And they were like, but we've got like 10,000 employees that need to work now. And within a day, and Jason's a bit of a wizard, but he set up a Citrix environment with 6 resource locations that use site aggregation with the NetScaler gateway service, and had all those users up and running in like 24 hours or 48 hours. It was like, that's where you're like, that's the power of cloud. And that's, Teams is exponential in comparison to what Citrix are doing. But we saw a service that wasn't quite ready hit all of a sudden 1 million daily active users was not something we expected to see. And I think I don't know how it's going to go once things go back to, I don't know what normal is anymore, but if there is such a thing, like we hear about, you hear Okta saying nobody from Okta needs to go back to the office. I don't know what the Microsoft stance is. I don't know what Citrix is saying quite right now, but you're going to see it's not going to change. Nobody's going to go back to, right, that cloud stuff, let's go back to the way it was working. They go, well, no, because we've just proven that this works. So let's carry on. We've proven that this stuff works. So, I think all of these things that you're talking about, you're just going to see it get bigger and bigger. Some people will go back into boxes, but, as we say in IGEL, it's like we sit on dirty networks, because that's the easiest way to say it. And we're an operating system that sits on the edge, and we enable you to connect from anywhere. Why would you not start to continue to treat people like they're at home, even when they're in the office?
I think that's a really good point.
Go for it, Daniel.
I was going to say, one of the things that we saw back in March last year was those customers that had already adopted a cloud-based desktop delivery model as their strategy. Their kind of BAU and BCP were just the same thing. You literally emailed their users on a Friday and said, right, guys, there's a pandemic on, everyone log in from home on Monday. And that was a done deal. And I think those customers that have moved more into cloud and a virtualized desktop style model in the interim, now they just have choice around return to office. They might go back to the office, they might not. Some of them might not. When they do, even those users that have a physical PC that they own, that might now get moved to a rack, and they can still connect to it, but they can sit at any desk. So we've created this environment where anyone can work from anywhere, whether it is the office or it isn't. And if and when, if something like this happens again, whether there's spikes, whatever, if you've got that fabric there that enables you to just work from anywhere, then we've proven that it works. And we've had customers and use cases that were completely anti-desktop virtualization for years. You said it's never going to work for us, technically, culturally, logistically, legally. They all said, no, we're not going to do it. It's not for us. And they've been forced into it and realized actually it works. It might not be perfect. There might be some constraints around collaboration, perhaps, or there's some challenges. But even some of those are because they're not just working from home. They're working from home in a pandemic. So it's other kind of domestic challenges that they're facing. But once you've made that leap, then you can genuinely work. I had a conference call with a customer yesterday. I had to present, and I was sat in my car in the car park outside my daughter's gymnastics, running a virtual desktop, and it just works. It genuinely.
It's one of those things, the COVID forced the great remote working experiment to happen, and businesses were able to react. And one of the things we found with IGEL was we had one customer who had several hundred call agents who were going into the office and working off PCs to actually connect to Citrix apps, and they all needed to go home very quickly. And they can't be taking PCs home. We won't be able to manage them. We won't be able to patch them, et cetera, et cetera. So what we were able to do was we were able to give them all IGELs, and they took their IGELs home, and they were able to connect into their remote resources then and continue working. So I think that's where we started to really see and showcase the power of how we could utilize IGELs to our customer base as well.
I think that's a really good point, because one of the things again we saw early on is customers that had sent users home with laptops, so a sort of laptop strategy that had loads of challenges with that around application security, application performance, but user support as well. Certainly in the depths of the pandemic, when you couldn't send someone broke their laptop, you couldn't send an engineer to them, they couldn't come into the office, you couldn't get hold of a laptop because everybody had bought them all up. And with a kind of Citrix and WVD model, customers would go down to PC World or Argos and buy a Chrome tablet or something, or an iPad, and be functional. So yeah, the whole working from home has opened up all sorts of weird and wonderful conversations that perhaps you wouldn't have thought about before, about some of the constraints of having a traditional kind of fat PC model. And certainly around security, one of the things that IGEL has come up for us actually for a lot of our customers is around security. That idea of an unmanaged device. Even those customers who sent people home and said, "Oh, I've got my kid's laptop," or "I've got a device," So okay, great, but you really want to secure that in IGEL, just completely kind of, by isolating the OS away from the underlying, installed operating system has been really successful.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit
to what. Sorry, I was going to say, if you go back to your question around working from home for Microsoft, Microsoft has always been, or its employees have always been pretty remote anyway, like lots of traveling, lots of working from home, lots of working on customer sites. But what I think is interesting is there's been lots of customers, lots of enterprises out there who have already made announcements around their strategy going forward. So HSBC were in the news, I don't know, a month back or whatever, when they said that 45% of their employees will be working from home. Now, that's probably distributed across maybe the entire planet, but I was just picturing the big building in Canary Wharf and 45% of that then being empty. So that's obviously a great saving to HSBC in terms of what's probably a very expensive rental bill for that building. But that also means that 45% of that building is going to have some kind of remote working requirement permanently going forward.
Yeah.
So I think that just kind of says, well, like you said, Craig, the genie's out of the bottle. This has been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt to be a robust and reliable mechanism for working, enabling, the savings for not only just office space, but commute time and all this kind of stuff. So there's massive upsides to an organization for doing that. And then you see some other customers. So I think it was pretty much the same period of time. Lloyds Bank made a similar statement. I don't think it was 45%, but they made a similar statement. I think it was Dropbox as well, much like Okta said, we're getting rid of all our offices. And I think even Dropbox paid a penalty for getting out of all of their rental clauses of all of these offices and said people can just work from wherever they want to work. So again, more requirements for exactly this type of technology, wherever it's coming from. I suppose it doesn't really matter, but it's still going to be that kind of remote access virtual desktop.
Was it PwC or Deloitte? Somebody talked about saving 1.2 billion in travel expenses over the period versus the previous year. And then you get into, cost of travel, the sustainability story around, those 45% of just one customer not traveling, not commuting into the office. There's a huge story there around, greenhouse gas emissions, and there's a huge sustainability story. But people do want to work. They do want to work around people. I mean, I've been working from home on and off for 15, 20 years now, but I still like to go into an office and see my peers, see my colleagues.
Human side that you miss, right?
I said, that chat on a Monday morning about what everyone's been up to at the weekend. That I can press a button in Teams now and talk to anyone in the world if I want to. But what you miss is that kind of just bumping into somebody in a different team and getting ideas and collaborating on stuff. You miss that definitely. But at least the technology enables you to have that choice, and you do it as and when you want to, as opposed to being forced to.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things that you just said about that ability to collaborate and being able to talk to people. And that's where, especially in the last 12 months, we've seen a huge explosion in the usage of Microsoft Teams. And that's one of the value adds that Citrix will bring to WVD is the HDX technology to optimize that Teams experience. And Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe IGEL was the first thin client to be able to optimize Teams.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Like I said, we have
I'd say Citrix and IGEL, and we are leveraging. Microsoft have done a great job. You can optimize Teams on WVD natively, right? There's no, like a lot of these things, we take IGEL and Citrix, we take what Microsoft has done and we build on it. So Microsoft can optimize Teams to a Windows client. What we've done is enable it optimized on a Chromebook, a MacBook, a Linux device, or an IGEL endpoint. So again, what the ecosystem means is it just gives you more options and more choice in things like collaboration.
I think the thing I've only been here 4 months, but the most compelling thing about IGEL, and maybe I'm underselling IGEL here, but is these UD pockets. The sun's on it, so it's wondering what the I've got shutter blinds and the sun is gleaming through, so it looks like I don't know what's going on there. But it's an incredibly powerful, like one of a Citrix customer, huge bank, and they're breaking financial regulation rules currently to enable their employees to work from home because they're using their own endpoints, so therefore they can't scan them, they can't do endpoint analysis. They can't push software down to them. They can't do anything that they would typically do if the employee was in the office. And this is why people don't like BYO. I remember Martin Kelly, if you remember, he was the VP of IT at Citrix back in 2010. And when Citrix achieved BYO, we dragged Martin Kelly around Canary Wharf for a week. I probably bored Tom with him. And he told everybody how Citrix achieved BYO. And the reason that was a great story, because once you told them how to achieve BYO, you told them or convinced them that they should buy Citrix, because that was it just went hand in hand. Now, obviously, BYO had its own challenges, like, well, if somebody looks at offensive material on their own personal device in the office, who's liable, and all these weird, and I'm sure you've all come across this, so it became really, really difficult. And now we talk to these guys and go, but if because BYO is not about using your own hardware, it's about using your own software. And so if we can put managed software very easily on a UD pocket, you just plug it in, turn it on, boot from USB stick, you now have an OS managed by the customer, controlling what goes on it. It's optimized for Teams or for Zoom. It's got the WVD client, or it's got the Citrix client on it, or it's got the VMware client, or it's got all of them on it. We even, and this still blows my mind today from my history of Microsoft. Microsoft have written a Linux version of Teams, right? And now we can install Teams directly on IGEL OS, and so we can actually say we can run Teams, whoever you use, because we can run it natively and layer it over top of your virtual workload. Now, we can do that for BlueJeans and for Zoom and then it's a very powerful message to be able to come. So for me, the UD Pocket is a very, very powerful message. It would be nicer if USB was managed, like it's F2 on a Dell, it's F6 on a HP, it's F10 on an Intel. There's no consistent, on MacBook, it's the Option key. But other than that, once you've got the thing booting, it is it's great. My daughter's I've got so many old Citrix laptops here from being at Citrix so long, that she's got my old MacBook Pro.
I'm sure you're supposed to have returned those, Craig.
No, it's BYO, like whatever it was, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're not here. So she's got that, and if I need to use something, I just take the UD Pocket, plug it into hers. It's configured exactly the same because it's a portable OS that I can use anyway. So anyway, off my little soapbox, but I think that is, it's a very, very powerful message around how you enable that. And just going back to what Tom was saying about, I actually remember actually there's two things. Firstly, I think there will be something else. Maybe not another COVID, but I mean, if you remember in New York, you had the snowstorms. And,
yeah.
And it's like all of us had to work. They all had to work from home. I remember Citrix had a bad pun, but it was called ICE licensing, so in case of emergency. And all those big banks were basically working from home for 6 weeks or however long it took for that snow to melt. I don't know if we're ever see another COVID, but you're going to see those chunks of when people are going to have to do this kind of stuff again.
Well, you can have it, can't you? You can have sort of DR at a sort of macro or micro level. It might be that the local train station is shut, or there's a flood on a local tunnel, or there's traffic issues that stop you getting into work, or it's you want to take the kids have got an issue, or there's all these sorts of things that might prevent you, even if your standard MO is that you work from an office. There's all these small or big, huge things that could get in the way. Yeah. So having a model that just accommodates any working scenario, I think, is key. Really.
In the past, if the train station was closed, people would, and I've done this, you would think of ways to mitigate that, but still get to the office. So you might go to a different train station and get a taxi or get in your car. Whereas now you would go, well, I'm just going to turn around and go home. This is going to be a working from home day that I hadn't necessarily planned for, but I know that I can be as productive, if not more productive, at home. So it's no loss. It's just been, a half-hour trip to the train station and back again.
It's only a matter of time before there's another volcano and people are stranded in place and need to work.
Yeah. And we have to remember, so not everyone, we're very fortunate. You see, Craig's got a lovely office there. I've got a nice office at home. We're in a very fortunate position. Not everyone is. Some people are hunched over a dining table or, in a flat, or so it's not ideal, but it works. It's viable. If you get the right infrastructure in place, then it is absolutely viable for.
I mean, if this had happened a few years ago, I would be very similar to what the story Shane was telling before we went online, which was I'd be spending 16 hours in my bedroom, sat on the bed with a pillow on my lap, leaning against the wall with a laptop. And, that's what as you say, Danny, that's what some people are doing. But I think it's really, the other thing, I won't mention the bank, but very similar to your story, Tom, about HSBC. You think about the big building in Canary Wharf, a bank in the similar area around the Cabot Square area, to help you. I remember them selling the building back to the landlord, and then leasing 4 of the 25 floors and populating it with the same number of people that were in the full building. I don't know how much money they made, but it was a building in Canary Wharf that was 25 floors high. So you can imagine, the money, and they repurposed it. This was well before the pandemic, but they were already like, nobody gets an office. Even the MDs don't get an office. You work where you can. This bank had enabled that kind of work in, so that just became a mindset. I think the banks have been lucky, or just because of the nature of their business, they were kind of already designed to work in this way. You've probably all spoken to them and said, it's not really affected us because we were already set up for this kind of way of working. But I spoke to Deloitte. They've got 250,000 laptops, but they've been working on laptops for so many years that, I've got a good friend there, and he's like, nothing's really changed for us because we've always been on laptops, we've always done this is the way it's always worked. It's not, so some businesses just haven't been impacted because they've just adopted what many wouldn't adopt for many reasons.
But I also think this is also going to change the in-office working going forward. So if HSBC or whatever the business is has reduced their office size by 45%, whatever it might be, and then sent everybody home, and they come in on certain days or 1 week every month or whatever it might be, the office is going to have to be fundamentally redesigned to accommodate that. So people aren't going to go in and then just find one hot desk over here and their teammates on a different floor because there's just individual desks. It's going to be, and I'm going to do the old air quotes, it's going to have to be a sort of a collaboration space. I hate that term, but teams are going to, literal teams of people are going to say, well, let's go in on Thursday and we'll meet up and collaborate or whatever, just come together in this particular location and work for the day, and then go home and work from home for the rest of the week, that kind of thing. So a standard office as it stands today is probably not really designed for that, because it's just hot desking and you come in and you sit down and then you go home and come in the next day, get another desk.
The chief exec from HSBC did tweet that in a picture of his new office. It's all just sort of spaced out desks, and they all just come in and work. I mean, I think that doesn't go quite into the collaboration space, but I think that would be a complete redesign of offices, as you say. But if you take it to its natural, if you really extrapolate it out, then it could really change a lot around society, around where people live and work, because cities are designed to match jobs and people. That's really what they're about, aren't they? If you are no longer attached by location to your work, then do you want to pay the premium to live in London? You might do for the social life in your early career, perhaps, but then businesses don't need to be in London to find the workers, and workers don't need to be in London to find the work. So all of a sudden, I mean, I live in Brighton, and down here, property demand has gone through the roof. There's a local estate agent told us they've got 300 people on their books from London looking for property around here in the last 6 months, because they've realised that the commute from here it's not terrible, but it's not brilliant. But if you're going to do that 2 days a week instead of 5, then it's manageable. And there'll be loads of coastal and rural communities that I think are going to benefit from that, because people will realise that they can go to live where they want to. I mean, I wouldn't want to be a commercial landlord in a city right now.
No, exactly.
The benefits. I was just going to say, just to go on to Tom's point, I think that is the thing for me, is like, you've all gone and tried to say, well, we can't use cloud because none of our endpoints have internet access. That fundamentally has to change. Like, you can't, firstly, because you're now using cloud services. So if you move everybody back to the office, those endpoints have to have internet access. Get them all off of these expensive networks where you're controlling proxies, what they can do, etc. It's like, just put it on a cheap, scalable internet connection, and just don't worry about it, because just treat them like they are at home, because that's what you're doing when they're at home. That's how they're accessing things. That is, like you say, Tom, that is like we deal with a Swiss bank, and they're still thinking in that way, like, but you have nobody in your office, and they're going to be in your office at some point, but like, this isn't going to work. So I think that fundamentally has to change, and it's only going to help people like Citrix and Microsoft and others, because now cloud can be easier adopted because of this.
On that note, the network clearly becomes a key component of your design. If you put all your workload in the cloud, then yes, the network becomes that biggest concern, that point of failure. So obviously at Citrix, we've done a bunch of work to make sure that our ability to deal with an outage has improved. So I've got a new service continuity capabilities to maintain sessions in the event of an outage. We've also got things like our SD-WAN capabilities, our home SD-WAN 110s. So your call center users sat at home where call quality connectivity is absolutely critical to their business. So these little devices sit under the desk, connect to DSL, but with an LTE failover. So in the event there's an outage or there's delays in the link, then it will just priority route to accommodate that. So you're right. Networking does become a bottleneck, but there are technologies now that will take that into account.
To go back to your point, that the societal improvements should flow through from this. So like you said, the network is now critical. So places like Brighton, I live in Bristol, the internet's going to have to be a lot quicker and a lot more reliable in these perhaps remote areas, and even more perhaps down in Cornwall, the internet's going to have to improve to accommodate all of those people that are going to relocate down there. Now, you'd hope that the internet would then improve for local schools or local charities or whatever it might be. So it's kind of like that trickle down effect of the improvement for not just those people that are moving from central London down to Cornwall because they work at a bank and can afford to, but the society that's down there should reap the benefits from all of this by being far more connected and far more reliably connected for more of the time.
And of course, using HDX, we put less load on that local internet connection than we would on downloading apps locally.
I think Shane's been trying to talk for the last 10 minutes, so
I was going to say we did have a question in, which I think we've kind of been hitting on, was what does the office look like for somebody who only works 2 to 3 days in the office and the rest remote? What could they expect of someone in that hybrid mode to look like from a technology point of view? And I think we're kind of hitting it there. That's, I think, as you said, Craig, if they're in the office, it should be just like they're at home as well.
I think there's a couple of different things. There's a couple of different approaches. One is that they're given a device and they're expected to carry that device with them. And they come in, they plug it in. There might be a KVM or just some cables, and they plug the laptop in and they work. But I think the better options are those kind of a thin client, whether it's an IGEL or equivalent technology, where the person just turns up. They don't have to carry anything. They might have their phone. We've got various kind of phone vendors like Samsung, Dex, and all these various vendors. But I think the solution is that you do have a true kind of sit anywhere, work anywhere. It's device agnostic, device independent. You sit, you log in, and you work. I think that's the two approaches. Either a doctor device or no device.
Yeah, and while someone's in transit between home and the office, like if they just need email and SaaS apps, as you say, a mobile device is perfectly capable of handling that today. So there is no need to be carrying around a clunky laptop with you. We a lot of conversations over the years with customers who say, okay, great, Citrix is great, but what about when I'm on the train? I haven't got connectivity, I'm on the train. And when you really boil it down to what do you actually want to do when you're on the train? You might want to answer a few emails. You might want to catch up with your diary or catch up with your whatever, but you're not likely to be doing line of business applications. And even if it takes Citrix out of the equation, how would you do it otherwise? You're not going to be sat on a laptop running Salesforce. You need internet for you need some sort of connectivity, network connectivity for pretty much most productivity activity, most productive activity. So I think that argument it comes up a lot, but I'm not sure how kind of valid it really is if you really boil it down to what you're actually going to do when you're sat on a Southwest Rail on a cramped little seat with a little laptop on the seat back tray. You're not going to get that. You're not going to be doing so many. So there's only so many apps that you're going to do in that model.
I would sound that question odd because I don't know where you guys live. I live between Hertfordshire and London. I can't even get a seat on a train. So I envy some of those people who can actually sit on a train and work, because I'm normally like this, So I was curious about how that works.
I've got to say, Shane, this glass house, deep-seeded tart fruit pale ale is fantastic. So top marks to whoever chose that one.
Excellent, excellent. I'll get that. I'm stuck with my Diet Coke. And I would love a beer. Lovely sunny evening. We're down to our last 2 minutes, really. That hour has just flown by. It's always fun to talk about these topics. There was one last question that just popped up there. How would you see hybrid working driving cloud-first strategies? Is there more of a driver as they work from home?
I think so. I think we've touched on that a little bit, haven't we? If you've got a cloud-first strategy, if your workloads, your applications, your data, your desktops are in the cloud, then it just gives you choice. You can be hybrid. You can be in the office. You can be out of the office all the time, none of the time, some of the time. It just enables that as a natural. You don't have to think about it. It's just available.
Yeah, I suppose just to add from our side, I suppose irregardless of coronavirus, which is easy to say, what we typically were finding is that we were speaking to customers about moving workloads to Azure, and at that point there weren't any specific workloads. It was more around this concept of enabling Azure as a platform inside of your organization that you can then onboard all of your different workloads. So we have this concept of an cloud adoption framework, this thing called landing zones, which is all about building core, secure, repeatable infrastructure, often delivered as code, to go and create this platform in Azure. And that's typically being led by a specific team inside of the organization. And they typically call themselves sort of the cloud team or cloud adoption team, whatever it might be, cloud engineering. And then what we would also then find is that customers have been doing that, and then they're starting to take workloads. And oftentimes it was the end user computing team that came along and said, look, we want to go and move our virtual desktop estate up into Azure. And they would then become customers of that cloud engineering team. So I think we were speaking to lots of customers who their primary goal wasn't to move, their end user computing estate to Azure. It was about enabling Azure as that platform all up, and then they were starting to take the cabs off the rank effectively. And it often turns out that end user computing is one of those first or second kind of workloads.
Okay, so we've reached the top of the hour. Thank you, Tom, Danny, and Craig for if anybody who wants to find any more information about any of the technologies we've talked about, WVD, Citrix Cloud, or IGEL, please feel free to reach out, and the recording will be available, I believe, from tomorrow, and it will be shared. So thanks very much, guys, and everybody have a great evening. Enjoy the sunshine and beers.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
All right. Cheers, Shane. Thanks.
Cheers, Tom. Have a good one.
Yeah, and you.